Hello, guys. Welcome back to another session. So here today in this session, we are going to focus on one of the most challenging type of questions that you may face in UPSC interview. That's the ethical dilemma question. One of the most difficult, but at the same time, this is the question that we are actually looking for, where you can, show exactly what you are to the board, beyond your knowledge and everything, and you can create a big and in fact very good impression in front of the board by showing the qualities that they're looking for. I'll be listing down and I'll be explaining each of that. So in fact, if you look at this, these questions are designed to test your integrity. Absolute integrity is what something which we need to show in front of them. Whether you have it or not, that's a different question, but how you can show that, I'll teach you. Again, ethical reasoning is what they're testing, and the ability to make tough decision. You may be in a dilemma, but at the same time you need to take tough decisions. So these are things that they will check, right? Honesty, integrity, and the ethical reasoning, the way you take the balanced stand by considering the ethical aspect. So the panel want to see whether you can handle complex situations where no easy answer and available, and at the same time you need to how you're going to prioritize values like fairness. Very important when it comes to public service, honesty and the public welfare. You need to focus maximum on the public welfare. So even if I take from my interviews, I encountered few ethical dilemmas, and you see they ask you ethical dilemma questions, they ask you crisis situations. So these are the questions which they actually ask you to test certain qualities from you, right? So I've understood that these questions are not just about knowing the right answer, that already tested in your ethics paper. So it's not about writing the answer, it's about demonstrating that you can make a balanced, thoughtful and ethical decision. So what we are looking for is we need to give a balanced answer depending upon the questions and the situation, by acknowledging the other situations, other ethical consideration also. It should be thoughtful, and it need to be ethical decisions by considering the public welfare also. Okay, so let's start the session. See, what do you mean by ethical dilemma? When we talk about ethical dilemma, it's a situation where you have to make a difficult decision between two or more conflicting values or principles. So you stuck with, two or more values, and you need to take a decision between that. So that's when you'll be facing dilemma. And these dilemmas are common in public servants, right? Where civil servants often face situations where they have to balance the competing interest, multiple interests such as law and order, public welfare, personal integrity. So sometimes when you need to follow the law, maybe your personal value will be in question, right? So there are situations that you'll be facing, and we'll be coming to that. Then sometimes you need to obey the orders of the seniors, but again, your personal value will be in question. One of the example, if I want to give, as a civil servant, you might face a situation where you have to choose between enforcing a strict law and addressing the genuine needs of the public. So on one side, you need to enforce a strict law, at the same time you need to address the genuine needs of the public. So there may be a protest may be for some genuine need, but at the same time, if the protest is escalating, and or to prevent from getting escalated, you need to enforce a strict law there. So what you will do in that situation, how you handle it in that situation, all we need to discuss, we'll be looking at that. See, ethical dilemma questions in UPSC interview, if you see, are basically designed to test how you approach this kind of situations, and whether you can uphold values like honesty, fairness, accountability, and making practical, thoughtful, ethical decision. So remember, absolute integrity will be tested here. How fair you are when you're taking the decision. That's again very important. Accountability, right? And then honesty, of course, when we talk about integrity, that will come. So, and the practical decisions, not the theoretical decisions which you have already given in the ethics paper. So the panel want to know that when you're faced with such tough choices, you will make decisions that align with your values, which is expected out of a civil servant. What are they? Integrity you need to show, fairness you need to show, empathy you need to show, commitment to public good. See, these are qualities that they are looking for from your side as a future civil servant. So when you know these are what they are looking for from this particular question, then of course, what is your job here? You just need to show that. Right now, whether you have empathy, whether you are committed to public service or public good, or you have integrity and all, that's an entirely different question. But here, you are there, you are sitting in front of them to prove that, to show that you possess these qualities. Simple. So what they're looking for, understand this, that they're looking for integrity, they're looking for honesty, they're looking for fairness, they're looking for accountability, they're looking for someone who have empathy and commitment to public good, right? So, and someone who's capable of taking thoughtful, practical, ethical decisions. Now, what all things that we need to look at? See, when we answer ethical dilemma questions, we need to have a structured approach that will actually help you. So I'll give you the structure. First thing that you need to do is, see, whenever you get ethical dilemma question, there will be a conflict, right? Conflicting values or conflicting choices. So identify the conflict, right? And you will have multiple options. So weigh the options, consider all the stakeholders who are involved, and choose the ethical path. So simple, just follow this, then things will be automatically fine for you, right? So start by identifying the core ethical conflict which is involved in the situation. What are the competing values or principles which are at play, which is given to you? For example, are you choosing between following a legal rule and ensuring public welfare? Right, and then you consider different options. So once you identified the conflict, right, that's the first step. Consider the possible courses of action. What are the pros and cons of each option? So this is where you analyze the potential consequences of your decision. So you need to analyze each of the options, you need to understand the consequences of the option, and again you need to think about how different stakeholders are affected your decision. So consider the stakeholders. So who stands to benefit with the decision that you take, and who might be harmed with the decision that you need to take, that you're going to take? So stakeholders must include, it could be public, it could be government official, and it could be specific communities. So you need to take a balance, who's benefiting, what benefit they get, who's losing, and what losses will be there. So what is a fair decision here that you can make, right, for the larger public good? So all these again need to be considered, and finally you'll be getting making a decision based on the ethical principles. Which option aligns best with values like fairness, right? Because you are considering all the stakeholders. So your decision need to be based on fairness principle, integrity, and the greater public good. So be prepared also to explain why you chose that path. So identify the conflict, weigh the options, consider all the stakeholders, choose an ethical path, explain why you have chosen this path. So in one of my interviewers asked how I will handle a situation where a senior official pressured me to bend the rules for political gain. So I followed the same framework. First, you identified the ethical conflict. We'll discuss this in detail, but I just tell you the process, the step. So identify the ethical conflict here. What is the ethical conflict? There is a political pressure on one side, and there is an integrity, personal integrity on the other side. So the question is about integrity versus political pressure. Then what I did is I weighed the consequences of either decisions, considered the stakeholders involved, and ultimately chose the path of integrity, because I know what they are looking for. They are looking for integrity, right? They are looking for fairness. They are looking for someone who's honest, right? So, and then I have explained that upholding ethical standards is non-negotiable for a civil servant. The language that you use is very important. Like when I say this, upholding ethical standards or integrity is non-negotiable for me as a civil servant. Very important when you use these kinds of words that communicate something beyond what you actually communicate them. So the words matters. That's why I'm again sitting with you one to one and trying to refine it and fine tune the words that you use, the way you answer the question. So it's not about you're just answering. It's about the words also that you use to frame your answers. That's why I'm giving the structure that you need to follow. So at least if you follow the structure, you will be explaining what all things which are at play. So when you face with ethical dilemmas, your decision should be guided by fundamental ethical principles. Now, the question is, what are these fundamental ethical principles? Integrity, that's the core of everything. Fairness, very important when you're dealing with the public service. Transparency, again important when it comes to public service. Accountability. So just follow these four core ethical principles. These are the fundamental ethical principles: integrity, fairness, transparency, and accountability. This is your decision that you take in an ethical dilemma situation should be based on these four fundamental ethical principles. So, see, what is this? When we talk about, now, I'm not getting into the theoretical aspect because you've already done this in ethics paper. But in one line, what do you mean by integrity? This means always doing the right thing, even if it's very difficult to do. So, as a civil servant, you are expected to uphold the highest ethical standards And integrity, should guide every decision that you make as a civil servant. Even if no one is watching you, you will do the right thing only. Simple. That's what all about integrity. Coming to fairness, what do you mean by fairness? Fairness means ensuring that all your decisions do not disproportionately favor one group over the other. So it's about being impartial and treating everyone equally under the law. So that is fairness. Treat everyone equally under the law. Third one is transparency. That ensures that your actions are open to scrutiny and that there is no hidden agenda. It helps to build trust with the public also. So transparency is very important. Your actions are open to scrutiny and there is no hidden agenda because you are a public servant and there should be complete transparency in your actions as a public servant, not your personal actions. Right, but if you become a public servant, sometimes your personal action also become transparent and accountable. That is a different thing that we need to discuss. Again, accountability. As a civil servant, you're accountable to the public and the government. Accountability means taking responsibility for your actions and decisions, and especially when things go wrong. So you have to take that accountability or take that responsibility of the actions and decisions. So when you're answering an ethical dilemma question, it's very important to demonstrate that you understand and apply these principles in your decision making. So I hope now you got the thought framework and you got the ethical principles and the fundamentals. Now the moment you realize that this is a question which is related to some ethical dilemma, then will you be able to frame and add these elements into your answer or not? That's the question. For example, if you have asked about handling situations involving corruption, so what you should do, you should prioritize integrity and transparency in your responses, right? So simple. If you the moment you see corruption in your question, where some ethical conflict or dilemmas involved, you talk about integrity, transparency in your the answer, and if you want, you can talk about accountability also, and explaining that as a civil servant, you would take immediate action to address the issue and ensure that the public trust is maintained. So this is what you need to do. It is very simple. In one of my interviews, I was asked how I will handle a situation where subordinate was involved in a corruption scandal. So now you know your subordinate, and then it's a corruption. So there is an ethical issue involved here, right? So you need to focus on what integrity dimension, transparency dimension. So I explained that my priority would be to act with integrity and transparency by reporting the incident through proper channels and ensuring that due process was followed. So this is what you need to do as a civil servant, public servant. You need to make sure this is the ethical fundamentals of ethics, right? That you need to follow. So this approach will show the panel that you understand the importance of accountability and upholding ethical standards. So remember, guys, what they are looking for. They are looking for certain ethical standards from you at this level. So in future, it will be perfect. What are the ethical standards? If you understand, that's about integrity, that's about honesty, that's about fairness in your decision, that's about transparency in what you do, that's about accountability, whether you will be taking the responsibility of the actions and decisions that you take. Will you be a person who you are a person who is able to make thoughtful practical decisions or not? So this is what you need to focus now. See, no one will teach you like this. So having understood these things, this is the practical experience, right? Then will you be able to give a very good answer now? Right, okay. Now, see, ethical dilemmas can be even more challenging during crisis situation. In a crisis situation, because you need to take very immediate decision, quick decisions are required, but long-term ethical considerations still matter. So sometimes when you take very quick decisions, you cannot think about ethics at that point of time. So in these situations, you may have to balance immediate action, such as ensuring public safety. That is more important. So I'll be discussing more and more examples in the sessions. But again, even if you looking for immediate action, ensuring public safety, but try to uphold the ethical principles like fairness and transparency over there. For example, imagine you're a district magistrate during a natural disaster and you're faced with a dilemma of allocating limited resources. So, do you prioritize certain groups over others, or do you find a way to ensure that resources are distributed fairly and transparently? So, in crisis situation, remember, guys, it's very important to act very quickly, but always with an eye towards fairness, accountability, public welfare, transparency. Your decision not only address the immediate crisis, but also maintain the trust of the public in the long term. Okay, so in one of my interview, I was asked how I will handle a situation where public protest was escalating into violence. So the ethical dilemma was balancing law and order with the right to protest. They have the right to protest, but at the same time, you need to balance the law and order. So I explained that while my immediate priority would be to ensure public safety by controlling violence, I would also engage in dialogue with protesters to address their concerns and avoid using excessive force. So this demonstrated that I was not only focused on resolving the immediate crisis, but also on upholding the ethical principles of fairness and respecting democratic rights. So this is how it need to be handle. So one more example, if I want to give, in my second interview, I was asked an ethical dilemma that involved political interference in an administrative decision. The question was about how I will handle a situation where a politician pressured me to grant favor that went against the official rules. So again, I have discussed, I think, in the previous case also. So I approach the question by first identifying the conflict. You follow the order, the process, identify the conflict, weigh the options, consider the stakeholders, take an ethical decision. So upholding integrity versus yielding to political pressure here. So the question is about your integrity, and on the other side, it is a political pressure. I then explained that as a civil servant, my primary responsibility is the public and the law, not political interest. So that's, as a civil servant, you are not concerned about the political interest. Your interest is public. You're a public servant and the law. So I made it clear that I would refuse the favor, but I would do diplomatically. It's not harsh or anything. So explaining the legal reasons for my decision and ensuring that I maintained a positive working relationship with the politician without compromising my ethical standard. Because he is an MLA, so you need to work with him and his team in the district anyway, right? So you need to maintain a working relationship at any point of time with that politician without compromising your ethical standards. So this approach showed the panel. In fact, it will show the panel that you understand the importance of integrity, and you are willing to make tough decision, thoughtful decision, ethical decision while remaining professional and ethical. So this is the approach that they are looking for. This is the kind of candidate they are actually looking for. So in conclusion, what I want to tell you guys is ethical dilemma questions are going to test your integrity, your decision-making abilities, your commitment to public service, and all these. So if you use that structured approach which I've given to you, just keep in mind, identify the conflict, weigh the options, consider the stakeholders, and choose the ethical plan. You will be able to handle these questions very confidently. So always apply the key ethical principles which I've told you, the fundamentals of ethics, the fundamental ethical principles: integrity, fairness, accountability, transparency in your decision making. Try to bring in these elements into your answer. And remember to balance the short-term action with long-term ethical considerations, especially in a crisis situation. So again, make sure that you practice more with me, one-to-one session, practice in mock interviews, and then your mentor finally go to the board. Okay. So by the time you approach the board, things need to be clear. The order should come, the flow should be there. So that's about the session, guys. And thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. If you like the video, share it with your friends also.